Hello everyone, my name is Armia, and today we are checking out Vampire the Masquerade, the clans. Yes. For those who don't know, I've been told to check out Burger Krieg a bunch of times now. And, well, that's what we're doing. That's really all it is, honestly. Honestly, like, I haven't really watched Burger Krieg that much. I've seen, like, a few of his videos. But today I was like, I want to talk about World of Darkness. So Burger Krieg is a thing. So there you go. That's what we're doing. That's what this is. Okay, anyway, let's get into it, shall we?
So a lot of people have used the past 2 years of this slowly ending global situation to learn something new, useful, and interesting. While
I learned how to become a VTuber.
this was going on, I was reading a lot of Vampire the Masquerade lore. Now, this is one of the biggest role-playing games in the entire world. It is played traditionally at the gaming table, but it is also immensely popular in LARP.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, actually, Vampire the Masquerade and World of Darkness in general, although it's definitely mostly Vampire, might be the biggest thing in LARP, honestly. Next to stuff like, you know, D&D. I need to look up, like, actual numbers, but I wouldn't be surprised if VDM was, like, the LARPing thing, because I feel like whenever I looked into LARP, I found a lot of vampire stuff.
Such a major cornerstone of the...
So can I just say, his sock mic just makes me think of, like, Dairy Queen or something.
Vampire genre, that it gets referenced in persiflage movies and shows like What We Do in the Shadows. And really the main question when coming up with any piece of vampire fiction is, what are the vampires going to be like in this particular work?
Yeah, like, if you've ever seen Castlevania, like anime Castlevania, Dracula in that is still a vampire. But he's very different to, say, well, World of Darkness, most World of Darkness vampires. Even Dracula in World of Darkness is not quite to the level of Dracula in Castlevania, you know? I think it's quite interesting how vampires are actually quite variable in fiction, where you can have things like the Nosferatu, where they're very monstrous and horrifying, or you can have things that are almost human, but, like, not quite, you know, you can reach all the way to, like, the Twilight tier, where they're basically just superhuman people who happen to drink blood every now and then. Which, there's nothing inherently wrong with either, to be clear, just the spectrum is quite big, and I think that's interesting.
Almost every culture in the world has some form of vampire myth, sometimes even several. And with how long this kind of creature has been a massive feature of the cultural zeitgeist, there are countless renditions by countless creatives, so there are so many options to choose from.
In the medieval period, there was a lot of folks that believed vampires would come back based on, like... Also, this is quite a frame. Burger Krieg about to attack you personally. Sorry. What was I saying? I completely forgot what I was saying. I was saying, yeah, so in the medieval period, there was a whole thing about vampires, basically being like vengeful spirits sort of deal, except what they would do is they would rise up from the grave in order to drink the blood of their family specifically, which I think is interesting.
To mention, you can just make new shit up. The answer Vampire the Masquerade gave to this question was... yes. There are...
Also, normally I'm like, one swear per stream, one swear per video, but Burger Krieg is Australian, I believe, so I'll allow it.
Total of 13 clans in Vampire the Masquerade, and a whole bunch of bloodlines that we're not going to talk about today. And they all have different attributes.
Yeah, honestly, if we got into the bloodlines, I think it would be like a 20-hour-long video.
And abilities, because they are descended of the 13 different antediluvian vampires. These are famously the vampires of the third generation, and while it is not clear that these are the only vampires of the third generation that ever existed, they are the only 13 ones that survived the flood, meaning they were the only ones that were able to procreate.
There's some interesting stuff about the antediluvians, by the way, that he might get into, but the antediluvian, so for those who don't know, antediluvian means after the flood, right? Like antediluvian, literally. Like the biblical flood that wiped out like humanity during the time of Noah. Which is, it's one of those weird things about World of Darkness, that, like, Christianity is just real. Like, the Bible is just true in World of Darkness. Not entirely, but it's sort of there. And I think a very interesting thing about that is, like, obviously Cain being the first vampire, first generation, and then we have the second generation, which is a lot more muddy. Like, we know some names, but the specifics are very... well, muddy. Also, Cain might not even be real, or there might not even be one Cain. There might be multiple. We don't really know, because World of Darkness, as a whole, for those who don't know, World of Darkness kind of operates on nobody knows what's happening. Like, the way I introduce World of Darkness to people, if they really want to know about stuff before playing, because generally I'll just be like, no, you'll figure it out as you play. But if they really want to know, I say, every conspiracy is real, and I let them run with that. And then oftentimes they notice, like, wait, that's not entirely true, because, you know, some conspiracy theories are completely wrong, some are completely right, and it's just this complete mess of shenaniganery.
Very cool fact about vampire lore is that it's often ambiguous and contradictory, which not only gives mystique, but also makes it very forgiving to run, because nothing is truly completely set in stone, aside from like the most fundamental details.
Yeah, it's your World of Darkness.
Clans are kind of your ethnicity as a vampire, or kindred as they prefer. In practice, this means that you share certain physical traits with other members of your clan. Certain personality attributes are a lot more frequent. You have been brought into the night through a similar cultural lens, and you probably have very strong connections mostly to other members of your clan. And look, listen, I know that this isn't how ethnicity really works. It's an arbitrary socially constructed category of categories that is used in anthropology. However, it is the analogy that tracks best for what a vampire clan is.
Like, I'm trying to think of, like, another analogy that could work, and ethnicity is, like, the first thing that comes to mind. Maybe culture to some degree, but even then, like, culture varies so much from city to city. So, it's like, Nosferatu, for example, in one city, might be Camarilla aligned, which you might not know what that is. Basically, government aligned. While Nosferatu in another might be Anarch aligned, or Sabbat aligned, or the Independent, or something else. Like, it varies to such a degree, and like, ethnicity, I guess to a degree, species, but that implies, like, species doesn't really work, because it's not like a Nosferatu and a Toreador are not, like, both vampires. So that doesn't quite work. Sorry, I'm trying to think of a different one, and I just can't think of one.
The thing is, just like with ethnicity, every individual is still fundamentally their own person, their own personality,
absolutely,
their own goals, abilities, and ambitions. So a given character can be pretty much anything that you want them to be. They don't have to agree with the loose shared ideals and cultural norms of their given clan. Clans tend to...
Sorry, it's completely unrelated, but I just noticed it. He has really nice hair.
You turn, or as they call it, embrace certain specific types of people, but you don't become that type of person by being embraced into the clan. That's
Indeed.
not how this relationship of causation works. So ultimately, you...
Although, importantly, while you are still your own person, being a part of a clan will obviously influence both you and the people around you, right? If you are a Nosferatu, you will be treated differently than a Toreador, generally. That doesn't mean, like, you know, you can't have a very powerful Nosferatu and a very, like a pariah Toreador, but you will be treated differently, just based on your clan, to some degree.
will find every category of person in every given clan. Of course,
Absolutely.
you will be affected by the prejudices that other people may or may not hold.
Okay, I keep saying what he's about to say. I should just let him play a little bit longer and then see.
Particular clan, which is something that unfortunately very closely tracks with ethnicity.
Unfortunately.
Every clan also has a bane, a particular vampiric weakness that affects them. Very important though, no matter what clan you are, the sun will fuck you up. Vampiric society is...
Except for one exception, technically. Sort of. Some Thin Bloods, which are vampires of the, I believe, 13 for higher generation, can walk in the sun for longer. There's also some other stuff, like willpower, and there's gargoyles, and all sorts of other, like, little bits and bobs. 99% of vampires cannot see the sun, for sure. It's just, Thin Bloods are interesting, and maybe I need to make a video on Thin Blood sometime.
is roughly organized along three major governments or ideologies called sects. The Camarilla is the biggest and most influential of all of them, where most campaigns are set. They're an old-school feudalistic society that clearly delineates and illustrates the ranks and positions and social order that they expect everyone to adhere to.
I had a very interesting, I had a very interesting game of Vampire the Masquerade that I ran once, which was like a few sessions long, like a mini campaign. And these were Camarilla agents, right? They were meant to work for the Camarilla. And they assumed, being new players, that the Camarilla was like the standard good guys, you know, your Ultramarines, your, like the Guild for every fantasy world, the lawful good aligned paladins and priests, etc. No. They are not. The Camarilla is a feudalistic, power-hungry society of noblemen who will use you as a tool and then set you aside if you're lucky. If you're unlucky, they'll drain you dry. Sometimes literally, sometimes not so much, though generally the Camarilla doesn't like diablerie, which is a vampire drinking another vampire.
And they see themselves as the sole legitimate government of all kindred. The Anarchs are an ultimately very ideologically diverse group that at some point said, hang on, we actually don't like this thing where we just are ruled by the elders of our clans all the way up to the Antediluvians. Antediluvians, the very existence of which the Camarilla denies, by the way. So they did the Anarch Revolt a while back, and were mostly crushed by the forces of the Camarilla and the Human Inquisition. The Sabbat was kind of the ISIS of the Anarch Revolt.
Oh god, yeah, that's true. It's correct, but god dang.
It became a very powerful organization dedicated religiously to the jihad, which is the process of the younger generations destroying the elders so they can gain freedom from their rule and then rule humanity in turn. And even
you can also see it as like a crusade. I think I have heard the term K-Night Crusade, for example, before, if you prefer that sort of term. But overall, the Sabbat are, while the Camarilla and the Anarchs are definitely not good guys, then they're not always evil. Not always. Only like 99% of the time. The Sabat are kind of just like, let's be evil all the time. Again, there's nuance, obviously, but generally speaking, the Sabat are the bad guys.
They do want to rule the world openly, they still stick
Yeah.
to the Masquerade, which is a rule that kind of everyone adheres to because they know that if humans find out vampires exist on a large scale again, they will, like, kill most of them.
Yeah, a few things there. First of all, to wear the skin of a sheep, to pretend to be another, to pretend the vitae does not flow in thine veins, you shall drink in the shadows. But also, notice he said, again, which he might get into.
Again, I will now give you no...
Okay, he doesn't yet. So, why does he say again? Well, you know how in the 15th and 16th century there was an Inquisition? So about that, that was a bunch of vampires going, hey humans, there's a vampire over there who happens to be my rival. Go kill him. And then they're blowing up in their faces because vampires are smart, vampires are manipulative, but they're also very cocky. And they have a tendency to kind of get complacent in a lot of ways, which, if complacency kills you, because, yeah, a single human is gonna get bodied by a single vampire most of the time, right? Like, is there a chance? Yeah, sure, but, you know, average human versus average vampire, vampire wins. The thing is, there's 8 billion humans and, what, like 100,000 vampires, maybe? Maybe even 1 million. Maybe even, let's even say, like, just for the sake of argument, let's say 1 billion vampires. That's a lot. That's like way more than there actually are, I'm pretty sure. Humans still win. Humans still win because the humans have all day to work on these things. The humans have nukes, the humans have, like, all kinds of crazy stuff. Humans win if it comes to, like, a full war. Anyway, yeah.
View of all the 13 different vampire clans, and instead of ordering them alphabetically, I have ordered them by relevance.
Actually, I just realized I didn't finish that that sentence. So the Inquisition, 15th and 16th century, yeah. So going after each other, and that caused, among other things, the Masquerade to be born in its modern sense.
In terms of how likely you are to get in touch and how important they are going to be in a standard Vampire the Masquerade campaign, also called a Chronicle. We will start with the 3 patrician clans of the Camarilla, a distinction that is informal and mostly relevant to people who are interested in large-scale international Camarilla politics, because these are the 3 clans that between them hold the most princedoms.
Which, as an aside, it can be quite interesting playing, like, a high-level game of like, Camarilla geopolitics. It can be quite interesting. Crusader Kings 2, I don't know if 3 has it, but Crusader Kings 2 has a mod where you get to play as vampires in medieval Europe, which is quite good.
AKA most of the cities are ruled by these 3 clans. Keep in mind once again that there are princes of every clan in various different cities around the world, and also any given member of a clan can be part of any given type of government or institution.
Yeah.
In the
For example, a Nosferatu rules Brussels.
world of vampires. The grandiose and powerful clan Ventru, also known as the Blue Bloods, or the clan
Yes.
represents the...
No, it's fine, Burger Krieg. I've got this one. Clearly, I need to be the one to explain the Ventru. I think you already get them.
aristocratic Machiavellian type of vampire with access to vast wealth. Throughout history, they have occupied the position of pragmatic rulers of worldly matters, be that as knights during the medieval era or wealthy industrialists today. And they do in fact see themselves as the rightfully ruling clan over all the other vampires, because what would the rabble do without their guidance? Even to this day, a significant portion of new embraces into the Clan of Kings come from actual, like, real-world nobility. In the old world, more so than the new, for obvious reasons, aristocrats tend to have very big bank accounts and a sense of decorum, which are two things that the Ventru really care about. They often embrace successful business people or people who they reckon have the potential to become very successful business people. But also,
I actually had a funny story about that. I once had a player who was a bum, but had a lot of cool ideas, and they actually caught like a Ventru's eye, and they were embraced. And they turned out to be a failure. So they were kicked out on their ass and joined the Anarchs, which I think was kind of interesting as a backstory. I don't remember what we did with that character, but I thought it was an interesting concept for sure, of wanting to play like a Ventru Anarch, which obviously the Ventru, being the Clan of Kings, is very aligned with the nobility and thus the Camarilla.
those stalwart figures in military or law enforcement positions that demonstrate good leadership and administrative skills. Before the embrace actually happens, there's usually a prolonged interview process, which obviously the intended recruit knows nothing about. They just think they're meeting very frequently with a very peculiar business partner that has taken a strange interest in them. This is then followed by intense and comprehensive coaching, some might call it micromanaging, to instruct the new arrival in the ways of the clan and the ways of the Camarilla. The clan has access...
This is also, just to be clear, obviously this is the... Watakashinekomi runs on exceptions, so this is the rule. But if you're like, hey, I want to play a Ventru that doesn't follow that pattern, you can absolutely do that. Talk to your storyteller, like, discuss it, and see where you can go. Like, obviously most Ventru aren't going to be willing to just pick up random people off the street, but it's not impossible.
Disciplines dominate, which is mind control, fortitude, which is supernatural toughness, and presence, which is incredible allure and charisma, making them very powerful social characters that are rather difficult to take down because of their physical and mental resilience.
I won't lie, I really like playing Ventru. I wonder why.
Between you and me, though, the Ventru only need one discipline, and it's called money. The Ventru is their rarefied tastes. Every kindred...
Okay, I do really like that, and it's true, it's true. Most Ventru, successful Ventru, have a lot of money, and obviously, money buys you bodyguards, buys you power, buys you... safety, which, as a vampire, especially a newly embraced vampire... is not always the easiest thing.
Knows that not all blood is created equal, and the Ventru can stomach only the finest caviar. Every Ventru has a
Which, as an aside, I think it's very ironic that caviar is now a rich person's thing, where it used to be a poor person's food. Same thing with stuff like lobster. Like, lobster used to be very much a desperation food even. Not even a poor person's food, like a desperation food. Or how brown bread used to be peasant food, and then with the introduction of Wonder Bread, it kind of flipped. Because Wonder Bread was made because everybody wanted white bread at the time, and it was considered luxurious to get white bread. And then now that's flipped, which I think is very interesting. Same thing with stuff like chicken, salmon, all kinds of other foods. Food is interesting.
Type of...
Okay, wait, I just had an idea for a Toreador cook, and now I kind of want to, like, talk about that a bit more. When the Toreador comes up, I'll talk about that idea a little bit.
Person that they like to drink blood from, and they have immense difficulty drinking blood from people who do not have that attribute. This attribute can be effectively anything so long as it isn't common. It could be twins, It could be vegans, it could be morbidly obese people, it could be people who can do calculus in their head good, it could be morbidly obese vegan twins who can do calculus in their head good.
Which, as an aside, you can absolutely make it incredibly difficult for yourself to feed on a daily basis, which can be really interesting to roleplay. Like, actually, genuinely, putting restrictions on yourself like that means you have to be aware of that sort of thing, which is interesting.
Man also has a compulsion, which is a particular neurosis that their beast, their vampiric side, will every once in a while really try to drive at the forefront of their mind. For the Ventrue, this is arrogance. They need to rule, they need to be in charge, they need people to obey their commands. The Ventrue Antediluvian is called, drumroll please, Ventrue. And not only is there very little known about him at all, but also officially, in keeping with Camarilla policy, Clan Ventrue denies his existence. Evidence suggests, however, that he went to India after the destruction of the first city.
Okay, the Tunak guy, I was not ready for that.
Because basically most of the clan's ancient history takes place in India. Some notable Ventrue include Fiorenzo Savona, who, despite being rather young, is a very influential figure in the inter-city connections, especially in Central America. Mithras, who, yes, is the sun god Mithras, which is brilliant, because if anyone asks you why you are only out at night, you can just tell them that you've been hauling the sun across the sky.
Yeah.
And Lucinda, a powerful Justicar dedicated solely to her mission of eradicating the worst and most dangerous enemies of the Camarilla. The gorgeous and creative
Aha! Here we are with the Toreador.
Toreador, also known as the Roses or the Clan of Vanity, represents the highly seductive, erotic type of vampire with an impeccable sense of style. They are
Indeed. So, Toreador are interesting because they are all about art, right? But art can take a lot of forms. Art can be, you know, painting or music, but it can also be cooking, and it can be, heck, it could be murder. It could be, like, pretty much anything. As long as there's a sense of artistry in there, then you might, emphasis on might, get embraced by a Toreador, especially if you caught their eye.
practically in love with human civilization and culture, seeing themselves as the ultimate arbiters of what is based and what is cringe. Because they're creative.
Listen. Cringe is dead, and I'm still breathing. Which is ironic, considering they're trying to embrace me.
Sparks tend to disappear over the centuries. They ultimately often take up the role
Sorry, I just imagined a Toreador VTuber, and it's very funny in my mind.
of patrons of the art, so they're all in the entertainment industry. Consequently, Toreador are primarily embraced from three major groups. Artists of all stripes and definitions, from sculptors to writers to figure skaters. Notable connoisseurs of art, like agents, critics,
that's
or
true.
testers.
Yeah.
And finally,
Yeah, like a film reviewer could become Toreador, absolutely. And like manager types.
just people who look good. That's a very valuable thing to have for the Toreador. The price
You're hot, you get embraced.
process of initiation into the clan can be quite nice. You get all this love and attention from this powerful old being, and you have all your old and new incredible needs taken care of. Some might say you are being love-bombed, and thus ultimately become highly dependent on your sire. And without
For those who don't know what love bombing is basically the act of spamming love at someone and like giving them a lot of attention and giving them a lot of your time, and then taking that away, so like they become dependent on the love bomber, and then you take that away, which, needless to say, is pretty dang cruel. But yeah.
particular Toreador can be and how easily bored they can get, you might just be dropped by the sidelines for a single misstep, or just because some new fascination entered their lives. The clan has access to the disciplines Auspex, which are highly sharpened senses, Celerity, which is super speed, and Presence, which, like with the Ventru, is the great alluring charisma. And yes, I will be repeating what each of these mean, just so you can learn them. The Toreador clanbane is their aesthetic fixations, as they are so incredibly obsessed with aesthetics that they cannot stand not being surrounded by things that satisfy their own personal beauty standards. This doesn't need to be like...
Which means a Toreador in the sewers is not having a good time.
Like the objective high art, there can also be people who feel comfortable in like a trash can Oscar the Grouch kind of milieu, and they would feel very irritated in like a high society restaurant. It used to be in older editions, they would just get absolutely transfixed with something beautiful that they would see, but I reckon they changed this because a few too many Toreador got transfixed with the beauty of the sunrise.
Indeed, which... it's very fitting to what I was talking about earlier with Castlevania, that one scene. If you know, you know. I won't spoil it if you haven't seen Castlevania. But... you silly boy. If you know, you know.
This is represented in the newest edition, Vampire 5, with their compulsion, which is obsession, by which they really become hyperfixated on some particular thing, be it a person, a hobby, could be a particular song that they just have stuck in their head, and they're thinking about this thing all of the time, and they just cannot get it out. So basically, all Toreador have OCD, ADHD, and borderline personality disorder. The
Toreador pretty much.
Antediluvian is Arakel, also known as Ishtar, the most beautiful woman who ever lived or unlived or ever will live or unlive, from the first city where she danced with bulls. Some claim she is actually the oldest of the Antediluvians, and even others claim that she is the twin sister of...
random, but like the dancing with bulls thing is just like, okay, sure?
The Antediluvian Malkav. Some notable Toreador include Rafael de Corazon, probably the most well-known of the co-founders of the Camarilla, Catherine of Montpellier, a historian and probably the most influential cultural trendsetter of the vampiric society of continental Europe.
Catherine de Montpellier is, by the way, definitely a character worth looking up. Definitely Google her sometime.
And Melinda Galbraith, who was actually the leader of the Sabbat for a while, even though she was pretending to be of a different clan. The secretive and conniving clan...
now we get to the fun one.
Known as the Warlocks, or the Pyramid, represents the kind of vampire what can do magic. One of the most
indeed, magic!
Powerful clans in the Camarilla, and everyone needs to deal with them. Nobody really trusts them, and this isn't just because they can do fucking magic, but also because they kind of are a very young clan and stole their vampiric heritage. The kind of
I think they're less than 1,000 years old, I believe. I think Tremere became a clan around... I want to say it was like 1200 or something like that.
But the Tremere embrace vary a lot because they have this whole complicated process of asking various people for permission so that the leadership of the clan can determine who might be useful to the clan in the near future. They do have a tendency to embrace intellectuals, especially the kind of intellectual that has a little bit of a fascination with the occult. But probably the most important...
yeah, like they'd embrace your Lovecraft types. Although, Lovecraft wasn't exactly an intellectual. He was more of a writer, some more Toreador, I suppose. I think if we're talking actual characters in Lovecraft books, maybe.
Trait to have is an inborn tendency to accept authority, because the Tremere are very authoritarian. Perhaps because they are not particularly old, they are...
arguably almost fascist.
The most explicitly organized of all of the clans, and they have a very strict chain of command. The Pyramid, as mentioned before, obedience to which was so long ago enforced through the practice of blood bonding. That whole command structure has sort of deteriorated a little bit after the Second Inquisition destroyed the clan's headquarters in Vienna, but a lot of chronicles still play it the old-fashioned way. The clan has access to the disciplines...
yeah, so the pyramid breaking is interesting as a world thing. But I think it's also interesting to have the pyramid be there, especially if you want to play a Tremere anti-tribu, like a certain gun-wielding wizard in Norfolk.
Specs, which is highly sharpened senses, Dominate, which is mind control, and Blood Sorcery, which in older editions was known by the much cooler term Thaumaturgy. Kinda self-explanatory, but also
I do wonder why they took away that name, because Thaumaturgy just sounds way cooler.
so not, because it's a very broad subject matter. This makes them ideal for perceiving magic, doing magic, and also ruling with an iron fist. The Tremere clanbane used to be...
Funnily enough, the Tremere actually wanted to have better magic than what they have now. What they have now is but a pale imitation of the powers they once had. It's quite something.
That they could be very easily bloodbound, aka made obedient to other vampires, but now with the shattering of the pyramid, it's actually become the inverse of that, in that they cannot bloodbind other kindred. Which
is, yeah, needless to say, for the pyramid, not great.
Of course, gives a huge blow to their authoritarian structure. Their particular compulsion is called perfectionism, and it's just this overwhelming need to get this thing just perfectly right, and nothing short of an absolutely stellar performance will set their minds right again. Now, the thing about the Tremere Antediluvian is that he is Saulot, who is also known as the vampire who actually is kind of a good guy.
Yeah.
He had a whole clan of his own, which is now hunted pretty much completely to extinction. But the founder of Clan Tremere was actually Tremere, a very powerful mage who found a ritual to turn himself into a
Tremere of the House Tremere.
Vampire, and then proceeded to diabolarize Saulot, which means drinking his heart blood to consume his soul in order to elevate his own power and legitimize his clan. Now, funny thing is, the goal he had was to become vampires without losing access to the magic, which is not what happened at all. They did lose their magic, all of them, big time, which was a problem because that's the one thing that they wanted to have them set apart, which led to the very interesting current situation where the Banu Hakim are going, hang on a second, right there, this...
the Banu Hakim, by the way, are basically... In very short, this is oversimplifying, but they're basically like the assassins, like the Hashashin, but Vampire Edition. A lot more complicated than that, but on the very base level.
Is the thing that you do with the magic, that's just our blood magic with the serial numbers file. Some notable Tremere include John Dee, who was a historical, actual, real-world figure that existed in the real world, but he, wasn't a vampire, and is the current leader of all Tremere in the British Isles. Aisling Sturbridge, who is very young, but nonetheless a very powerful regent of the Chantry of New York. And Sri Sansa, who is notable to me personally because he fucked a lot, and I think that's cool. The passionate and free-spirited clan Bruja, also known as the Zealots or the Learned Clan, represents the classic punk rock archetype of vampire.
Wow! I do love the Bruja. I really do. Honestly, I quite like playing Bruja as well. Although, it's very easy to make Bruja very obnoxious. Also punk hairstyle, just for... just to represent a little bit. Once
upon a time, some might have called them a patrician clan of the Camarilla as well, but they would have vehemently fought against that definition because they identify with the proletariat, with the oppressed masses yearning for liberation. And the Bruja are right there with them, to challenge authority, to fight the good fight. Bruja don't really have a lot of rules about who they embrace, though it usually tends to be people of oppressed groups, or even more frequently, agents who are trying to change the status quo, usually from like counterculture scenes.
Indeed.
Let's say certain groups that would do certain ops in order to achieve certain political goals. So essentially middle-class kids who don't need to hold down 3 jobs to pay the bills and thus have the time to do high-commitment activism. Now, while they're...
Yeah, although, that spans the gamut from, like, slacktivist to terrorist,
They are pretty cool. A lot of players like to romanticize them away from the fact that they are just hardcore ideologues who enjoy revolution for the sake of breaking shit. Many don't even believe in anything for the sake of believing it. They just believe in it because it is different than what they perceive to be the status quo. As such,
one of the most fitting and also annoying types of brouhaha I've seen was a guy who played like one of the, you know, those like pub contrarians where it's like, oh, I've been working here for 10 years, not 10 years, it's a decade, like that kind of stuff. Where it's like, yeah, you're correct, but it's also like you're just being obnoxious. Yeah, that kind of person is what he was, and I thought that was kind of a fun way of subverting it. But God, was the character annoying. Character ended up getting staked for the sun by like a bunch of other brouhaha, actually, who were done with his shenanigans.
You will find a lot of hardcore tankies, Nazis, Khmer Rouge enthusiasts, and people who post about politics on Twitter among the ranks of the brouhaha.
Okay, I do find... Not the people who post on Twitter! Ah! Twitter users! This is true, though, but I do find it funny that he brings that up.
Also well known for giving little to no guidance to their childer. Very often they don't even know who their sire is or what even is going on with them, and so they die pretty quickly. Because of course helping a youngling navigate the complex intricacies of the knight and vampiric society is a huge responsibility, and brouhaha will avoid that kind of thing like the plague. Frankly, I respect that. The clan has access to the discipline.
I respect it, but also think it's very typical. Yes, we're gonna make the world better by putting other people in dangerous situations and not taking any responsibility for ourselves. I think that's very, very typical of, like, the performative revolutionary. Ventru noises. Performative revolutionary. Clearly, the system is much better. No, obviously, there's a lot of good brouhaha out there. There's a lot of bad brouhaha out there. As with any clan, it's a complicated mess. I just, I don't personally like the idea of embracing someone and then just being like, all right, bye. Which, to be fair, it's not like the Ventru wouldn't do that either. It happens, absolutely.
Celerity,
less common,
which
but
is super
still.
speed, potence, which is super strength, and presence, which is alluring charisma, making them very intuitively well-rounded. Their powers are not some
The very Johnny Silverhand.
weird stuff, they're just human abilities driven to a great extreme. All of this also makes them extremely dangerous opponents in combat. The brouhaha clan bane is their violent temper. They just have a big problem keeping the unbridled rage of their inner beast at bay. They are much more likely to frenzy than any other clan. In terms of compulsion, they feel strongly drawn to rebellion, needing to piss in the face of the person that they perceive to be in charge, or in some other way transgress against what would be the orderly way of doing things in this situation. The brouhaha antediluvian was Troil the Elder, an extremely calm and dispassionate guy who got diablerized by his child, Troil the Younger, whose unbridled burning passion then became the bane of their clan as punishment for their transgression against their sire. Some notable brouhaha include Theobel, who is kind of responsible for them officially leaving the Camarilla and mainly aligning themselves with the Anarch movement now.
Yeah?
Smiling Jack Drake, a pirate.
Hey, here he is.
That golden age of piracy, who later became a very influential figure in the Californian Anarch Free State.
And by the way, Jack Drake shows up in Bloodlines as the tutorial character, and pivotal character throughout the story, really.
And Tyler, who was one of the primary leaders of the Anarch Revolt. The enigmatic and mutated clan Nosferatu, also known as the Sewer Rats or the Clan of the Hidden,
See, I love the Nosferatu.
previously misshapen Count Orlok type vampire. Now, even though you will definitely recognize a Nosferatu as being a Nosferatu when you see one, they are nonetheless masters of espionage, and you should always assume that there is a Nosferatu in the room with you right now. Even though they're looked down upon.
Hi there. Just like looking up. Oh, hi, invisible vampire. If I just get bitten.
On by polite vampire society, their abilities are nonetheless highly valued and sought after by the Camarilla. The Nosferatu embrace from two groups of people who could not be more distinct. On one hand, you have extreme social outcasts, such as homeless people or drug addicts. But they also, much like the Toreador, like to embrace exceptionally beautiful people. Unlike the Toreador, they do this as a punishment for their arrogance and cruelty to the people who are less privileged than them. So becoming a Nosferatu of all the kindred world is probably the first choice of few people. Their status as outcasts does give them a sort of increased cohesion within the clan, and they tend to be actually rather kind to each other. And their parallel—
True, and overall, not just cohesion, but I think the Nosferatu also recruit people who are talented in a specific field quite often. Where like, oh, we need someone who can do this thing for us. Let's embrace them. This happens with other clans as well, but I feel like the Nosferatu are a lot more pragmatic about that sort of thing than other clans, at least in my experience.
Society of the vast, sprawling underworlds of every city in the world, clan counts for more than sect. So you have cordial relations between Nosferatu of the Camarilla, the Sabbat, and Anarchs. The clan has access to the disciplines Animalism, which is control over animals, Obfuscate, which allows them to become undetectable, and Potence.
I do find the idea that Obfuscate doesn't have a logo pretty funny.
Which is super strength, making them not only perfect spy masters, but also dangerous ambush predators. The Nosferatu clan bane is that they're ugly as shit. That's it. That is the bane. Right, okay, so the reason this is the case is because when they turn into vampires, they undergo a transformation, extremely painful, by the way, that completely changes the way that they look. And many of them even end up being unable to exist even as a vampire, because that is how far they have mutated. Some are even more hideous than the average Nosferatu. A very small select group is not quite as disgusting, but any Nosferatu, the second you see them, you will immediately know this is not a human, but some form of horrible monster, making it—
I had a player once who wanted to play a Nosferatu who looked kind of like a mannequin instead of like your typical Nosferatu Bane, where they weren't ugly per se, but they were very uncanny, and you could definitely tell, yeah, like, this is not a human, right? Like, you could still instantly clock, this is not a human, something's wrong, all of that stuff, which is effectively what the Nosferatu Bane is all about. Their version was kind of more, you know, like, their movements were stilted, their smile was wrong, their eyes were just slightly misshapen, their skin, like, a little bit too plasticky, perhaps. Just this sort of strange being that made people uncomfortable around them, which, while I don't think it's strictly, like, following the Nosferatu concept, I still think it's an interesting idea, and unfortunately we didn't do much with that campaign either. There's a lot of campaigns that I started up back in the day that we made the characters, and then we needed to, like, you know, do other stuff, so it never got off the ground.
It's rather difficult for them to uphold the Masquerade. Their clan compulsion is cryptophilia, which is an intense need to know secret information that very few people are privy to. This is probably also one of the driving forces behind why they seem to know everything.
It's also why they made stuff like ShrekNet, which ShrekNet is the vampire internet, basically. It's more complicated than that, but it is basically vampire internet.
Nosferatu Antediluvian is Absimiliad, a massive asshole psychopath piece of shit who was also incredibly handsome, and as such was punished for his appearance to reflect the appearance of his soul. He hates all his spawn and seeks to exterminate them, but of course, with the Nosferatu being a Camarilla clan, they mostly don't even know he exists. Some prominent Nosferatu include Zelios, a genius architect and stonecutter who constructs elaborate labyrinths for reasons that only he quite understands. Baba Yaga, who is believed by some to be the progenitor of all modern members of the clan because she was the only one of Absimilian's childer who ended up procreating. And
also, Baba Yaga is in a very interesting alliance with a group of black spiral dancers, which are like evil werewolves, basically, over in Chernobyl. Yeah.
Calebros, who for a while was the Camarilla Prince of New York City. The wild and independent Clan Gangrel, also known as the Outlanders or the Clan of the Beast, is the archetypal country vampire that lives in the wilderness and is really more animal than person. Vampires are generally city people. They prefer to not be in the wilderness, where there is little in the way of consistent shelter and a lot in the way of dangerous shit. This is not true for the Gangrel, who even when they are in cities prefer to stick to the parks and outskirts. They also like to travel a lot, and they are the only clan that is even somewhat respected by the werewolves.
Yeah, although respected also often means hunted. Like, it varies a lot. Like, they're still vampires, and werewolves do not like vampires.
Prefer to embrace people who are unafraid and have a will to survive. This often happens like pretty spur of the moment when a victim vehemently resists feeding, which is actually difficult because getting fed on by a vampire apparently feels very, very nice. But they will also sometimes pick out people that they notice are unafraid of moving through the wilderness at night, and so they will stalk and observe them, sometimes over a period of several months, before embracing them if they find them worthy. Very few Gangrel will ask you if you want to become a vampire, and actually, if you are a
I actually had a Gangrel player who was a Black Hawk Down style pilot, like got shot down in the jungle, was stuck there with a broken leg for like a week, but kept surviving. So eventually a Gangrel that was observing them embraced them and left. Left them to their own devices. So they became like a jungle beast for a long time until returning to their homeland over the course of, I think it was like 20 or 30 years. Which by vampire standards is not very long, but obviously by human standards is quite a time.
Gangrel and you had the choice of becoming a vampire and took it, people are gonna look down on you in the clan. That's kind of something that they think is weak. The clan has access to the disciplines animalism, which gives them control over animals, fortitude, which is supernatural toughness, and protean, which gives them the ability to gain animal features or even transform fully into animals.
Indeed.
The Gangrel clan bane is that they gain bestial features when they frenzy. So this might be like bat ears that then appear, or they have like a strong dog stench. It used to be they would then have this feature forever, but they changed this in Vampire 5 because I guess they realized that if you have a frenzy once, like early on in the game, which will most definitely happen to you at some point, and you have a little bit of bad luck, you become just a walking masquerade violation.
Yeah?
Without the benefit of having obfuscate as a clan discipline like the Nosferatu do. So now those features go away after a while.
Which, as an aside, playing a Nosferatu without obfuscate is interesting but hard, to say the least.
Is feral impulses, which every once in a while will really drive the Gangrel to resolve a dispute through violence, the purest actual form of showing who is strongest and fittest and best to survive, and not this words bullshit, because they will have a pretty hard time talking. The Gangrel Antediluvian is Enoya, and it's very difficult to ascertain any information about her because all the lore about Enoya is passed through Gangrel lines via oral storytelling, and so there's a million different versions of Enoya. She may have been raised by wolves. That's one thing that may have happened. Some notable Gangrel include Cuthbert Beckett, a very notable scholar and archaeologist looking into the true origins of vampire.
Also shows up in Bloodlines.
Odin the All-High, who is, yes, indeed, that particular Odin, though he isn't originally Scandinavian. He just ended up there. And Xavier, who was a very powerful Justicar of the Camarilla, before officially declaring that his clan was now going to leave the Camarilla and join the Anarch movement. The ethereal and neurotic clan Malkavian, also known as the Cassandras or the Clan of the Moon, represents the sort of telepathic, psychic type vampire, though.
If you don't know, by the way, Malkavians being called the Cassandras is because Cassandra sees prophecies. And like, true prophecies, but nobody listens to them.
They do still drink blood. The Malkavians are a funny little group because they have changed a lot over the years of the game's existence. They used to be just straight up crazy people. There was sometimes an attempt at doing a serious exploration of mental health, but of course, as the topic in general has moved more into the space of public acceptance, it's become a bit more labor-intensive to actually deal with it properly. Yep. And personally, I think
Which actually, I will praise, like, Bloodlines 2, for example, for how they handled the Malkavian detective. Like, I think that one was quite good overall.
Does a very good job with that. Basically, they're all in tune with this psychic network that they all share, and through which they have a very loose telepathic connection to each other. But of course, every node in that network has their own little particular idiosyncrasies that distorts the view of the whole. They're an extremely diverse clan in whom they embrace, because it tends to be mental oddballs, and there's a lot of different ways in which you can be a mental oddball, but there does seem to be a certain, not preference, but just a statistically higher likelihood of them embracing intellectuals, because they tend to be celebrated more for their oddballness, and so hide it less. The clan has access to the disciplines Auspex, which is highly sharpened senses, Dominate, which is mind control, and Obfuscate, which allows them to become undetectable. They used to have a discipline called Dementation, which is now an amalgam power of Dominate and Obfuscate, which once again I'm not particularly happy with, but basically what it does is it makes other people go crazy. The Malkavian clan bane is their fractured perspective. They all have some wild and often destructive mental health disorder that they had a sort of predilection for during their life, even if there it never manifested.
I personally quite like the idea of it basically being like an amplifier. Like, if you have autism, for example, in real life, that mental disability or mental health issue might be like emphasized in a way bigger way. Or if you have a tendency towards schizophrenia, that might become like way more aggressive, etc. And Malkavians are interesting in that sense because quite a lot of people don't like something called the fish milk, which is Malkavians that are so crazy they'll just do random stuff, like slapping someone with a fish, which is where the term comes from. Which, okay, fair enough. However, the term fish milk also gets thrown around a lot. Kind of, oh, you're playing a Malkavian, therefore fish milk, you know? And on the one hand, while I think the subtle Malkavian, where like their madness is kind of bubbling underneath the surface, is quite interesting, I think the stark raving mad type of Malkavian does have a place in certain chronicles. It's just all about the execution, effectively.
No amount of therapy can help them with it. The clan compulsion is their propensity for delusion, because though they are connected through this magical, powerful network that can give them very meaningful visions of things that might happen in the future and things that are happening right now, they also can just as likely receive just complete bullshit streams of thought that will deeply upset their frame of mind.
I like to think of it like a daydream. Like you're sitting there and a daydream happens, right? And it just like pops into your head. And it might be quite nice or it might be quite awful or anything in between. And yeah. Or like, for example, something bad happened to Malkavian in another city and you suddenly feel that, etc. I don't know, there's a lot of interesting things you can do with the Madness Network.
Trust me, I have quite a few schizophrenia symptoms myself.
Oh,
I
fair
know
enough.
what I'm talking about. The Malkavian antediluvian is called Malkav, and
I
some
personally only have autism and dyspraxia.
think that he is physically, or rather non-physically, the actual telepathic network that connects all Malkavians. As such, even though they're a Camarilla clan, the Malkavians are not as religious in their denial of their antediluvian, but then they are Malkavians, so nobody listens to them anyway.
Yeah.
The Camarilla doesn't really care. Some notable Malkavians include Anatole, who has, for the past couple centuries, been predicting the end of the world, and it turns out that he actually is correct. Therese Vorman, who is the Anarch Baron of Santa Monica, and who appeared in the video game Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines.
A fantastic character, and another reason to play Bloodlines. Like, seriously. Play Bloodlines, even if you just play like the first part of the game. That's plenty. Just get the vibe. If you're at all interested in Vampire the Masquerade, just play that. Do keep in mind, when you play the game, you are an 8th generation vampire in that game. It's never stated, but the blood points you have mean you're an 8th generation, which is quite powerful. And most characters in a TTRPG are not going to be as powerful as a computer RPG. So just keep that in mind, like, if that's your first contact with Vampire the Masquerade, especially because Bloodlines is also kind of dated in a lot of ways, so while I still recommend it, there's just a few caveats to be considered, in my opinion.
And none other than Aleister Crowley himself, who, believe it or not, is also the sire of Jekyll and Hyde. The ruthless
I actually don't know who Aleister Crowley is.
and Darwinistic clan La Sombra, also known as the
La Sombra.
Keepers, or the Night Clan, represent the archetypal type of vampire that is a shadow being. I don't know that that's a thing that exists, but it is cool and it fits thematically.
It does
One way of
fit.
describing the La Sombra is that they're the Ventru of the Sabbat. They are extremely capable of constructing and navigating complex social structures, so they run...
I quite like to think of them as schemers, like the Littlefinger kind of style character.
The administrative and down-to-earth side of the anti-Camarilla sect. And they are very selective in their embraces. You have to be a perfect match for what your sire is looking for, and they will then completely and utterly annihilate your livelihood over the course of years in order to test the unbreakability of your drive and willpower. If at the end of all that, you're still focused, grinding, trying to secure the bag, they will reveal themselves to you. Interestingly, a lot of La Sombra
are a very interesting clan in that regard because of that sort of thing, because of the sort of ruthlessness of how they embrace, they tend to be very, 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 like, effective in what they do. But they also have a tendency to kind of backstab each other even more than other clans in my experience.
Are sailors. They're for some reason very closely associated with the sea.
I quite like the idea personally of La Sombra sailors. I don't actually know why they are associated with that. Maybe because like La Sombra is Spanish and Spain has a lot of sea stuff, I guess. Like I'm guessing here. I actually genuinely don't know. Like both La Sombra and Gangrel actually have like a lot of association with the sea. Gangrel have the Mariner Gangrel, which are Gangrel of the sea, quite literally. Quite a lot of sea monsters are just Gangrel gone mad. Because, I mean, you can just be a sea monster if you feel like it. You could do that. Like, basically any clan could do that in theory. Some better than others, obviously. A Ventru's not going to have a good time. But in theory, it's possible.
Which, I don't know how that fits, but I like it. And also the Catholic Church, and
maybe something of the line of, because they have shadow, like, you know, not magic, but like they control shadows and do stuff with shadows, etc. The whole sailing around thing becomes I don't know. I'm grasping at straws about the La Sombra's connection there. If anybody knows, let me know in the comments.
Religious institutions in general, but specifically the Catholic Church, the La Sombra, are deeply embedded in. And this is just another way in which they're sort of like an evil counterpart to the Venture, even though, I mean, the Venture were already kind of in that they will use anything to climb the social order. The clan has access to the disciplines Dominate, which is mind control, Oblivion, which used to be called Obtenebration and was their ability to control the shadows, and you'll understand later why I'm so very angry about this, and Potence, which is super strength. The clan bane is actually something very classic in that they don't cast proper reflections, not even on like digital cameras, though you probably will be able to identify them as themselves. The whole thing is going to be just busy with like shadowy artifacts and transparency issues, to the point where if you're unlucky, it might even be a Masquerade violation.
Indeed.
This has led to the ironic situation that the clan, which utterly despises the idea of humans having any sort of position or value within vampire society, are dependent on them for just basic things like telling them how they look and having them pick out good outfits.
Funnily enough, there was a La Sombra in one of my games that we did actually play who blood bonded another vampire for that reason. Like, they blood bonded, I think it was a 12th generation vampire of the, I think it was Tremere, funnily enough, because we were playing with the old pyramid rules. So, yeah. They had blood bonded a Tremere to themselves and used them mostly as a way to dress themselves. They didn't even use the Tremere for magic, which, looking back, is such a waste. Like, good lord.
The common compulsion that their beast drives them to is ruthlessness. They need to win. They need to achieve this goal, and they will do anything, sacrifice anyone to achieve that. Failure is not an option. The La Sombra Antediluvian went by many names, so people just tend to call him La Sombra. Now, the funny thing about La Sombra is that even though the Bruja would really like to claim this honor for themselves, they are actually the ones who kicked off the Anarch Revolt by diablerizing their Antediluvian. He was the first Antediluvian diablerized after the destruction of the first city, which is like so far in the past that the overwhelming majority of people don't even know that that was a thing, and he was diablerized by the youngest of his childer, Gratiano de Veronese. Some notable Sabbat include Lucita de Aragon, who was a Spanish princess and later became a very, very powerful archbishop in the Sabbat, Zadkiel ben Aron, one of the absolute grandmasters of Obtenebration, and Giangaleazzo Visconti, who, this is my favorite Vampire the Masquerade story. Basically, this guy, he got bored with the Sabbat.
Oh yeah, true.
It's a very violent and direct kind of place. So what he did is he took all the Sabbat hardliners in his city, Milan, and he switched from Sabbat Archbishop to being a Camarilla Prince by just killing all of them. And the reason for this is that he found the intrigue and complicated politics of the Camarilla more interesting. The stately and indifferent.
Which I love stuff like that. It's goofy, but it makes sense, right? Like, it's kind of human in a way, and I kind of like that.
Clan Tzimisce, also known as the Fiends, or the Old Clan, represents the classic Eastern European Dracula-style vampire, with a bit of a twist. Probably the most inhuman of all the clans. They don't even hate, like, regular living mortal people anymore. They just torture and deform them for pleasure. To continue an early analogy, the Tzimisce are sort of the Toreador of the Sabbat, the great philosophers of sadism, who are solely focused on the question of what it means to be vampire. Because they don't really care about humans all that much, they tend to embrace absolutely massively exceptional people who just happen to strike their fancy at that particular moment. In order to maximize the potential of kindred, because that's all that humans are to them, is just like little seeds that maybe or maybe not could have potential in some way to actually build something worthwhile out of. They have instituted centuries-long breeding programs to get the traits that they find most interesting. Yeah, this is how bad they are.
Oh yeah.
To be clear, eugenics is one of the least of their crimes.
Oh yeah, like eugenics is probably like the tippiest of the iceberg. I think if you have to pick one clan to be unequivocally evil, which even here, again, World of Darkness runs on exceptions. But if I have to pick one, it's the Tzimisce, for sure.
Being a very traditional clan that cares a lot about their own history, the Tzimisce are known to be very, very polite and hold especially the Lords of Hospitality in almost religious regard. This is, of course, primarily because they are complete sociopaths who are fully on the orange and blue morality spectrum, and these kinds of...
Necktie and bacon. What? I have never seen that before.
Very strict rules are the only thing that keeps them together. The clan has access to the disciplines Animalism, which is control over animals, Dominate, which is mind control, and Protean, which in their case is the ability to shape flesh. In a time where disciplines were not design efficiency to death, this was called Vicissitude, and it's the main standout ability of their clan, that they will physically change themselves and others, usually more others in more horrendous ways, but they also change themselves to be whatever they want to be, often going very far away from the human form. And this is now an amalgam power of Dominate and Protean. The clan Bane is called Grounded, and it used to be that they needed to sleep surrounded by their own...
I think it's one of the problems with Vampire 5th Edition is that, like, design thing. Because, like, I think a lot of Vampire 5th Edition is fine, right? Like, there's a lot of good in Vampire 5th Edition. It's not a wholly bad edition. There's just some bits that are like, not quite there.
Soil. But in V5, they changed this into something that I personally think is a lot cooler, in that now they need to sleep surrounded by something that is, ironically, a very core aspect of, like, their mortal identity.
Yeah.
That they used to have, like, their particular castle, or maybe their ethnic group. Could still be grave soil, by the way. This also kind of means that the Tzimisce don't really travel all that much. It's a bit of a logistical challenge. The clan compulsion is covetousness, which is also a classic vampire thing to do, where they, like, see something that they really, really, really want for themselves, and they will go to great lengths to get it. The Tzimisce Antediluvian is known as the eldest, and though as members of the Sabbat, of course, they are rather happy that this creature is no more, they do share its vision and even respect it, sort of, for going all the way into a direction of complete and utter inhumanity. A common saying among the Tzimisce is that instead of having a beast and a remnant mortal soul inside of it, the eldest just had two beasts. Some notable Sabbat include Sasha Vikos, who has...
By the way, there are a bunch of paths that don't involve humanity and the beast, where it's more just embracing vampirism as a whole. The Sabbat really do a lot of stuff with that, and a lot of Tzimisce especially embrace that inhumanity in some way. Although, quite a few Tzimisce see themselves more as just a type of artist, or a type of doctor, perhaps.
Turned themselves completely androgynous and is a very radical member of the Sabbat, known as their chief torturer, Radu Bistri, who used to be the Prince of Bistritz and is now a high-ranking member of the Sabbat, himself originating in one of those breeding programs. And of course, yes, the Count Dracula, who actually is a master of Koldunic sorcery, which is an even older form of magic that the Tzimisce had access to before they adopted Vicissitude. It's basically like an Avatar The Last Airbender style spirits of the land element bending. The young
Dracula, by the way, in World of Darkness is hilarious, and you should definitely look up his story, because part of the reason why the Dracula book exists is because he found it funny troll the camarilla. Like, that's kind of what it comes down to.
Young and self-interested Clan Hecata, also known as the Lazarines or the Clan of Death, represents the archetypal vampire who is a corpse. Now the thing about the Hecata is that they're less a clan than a bunch of bloodlines in a trench coat. They formed in the 21st century through a ritual called
3 bloodlines in a trench coat.
The family reunion, which united the Giovanni, the Samedi, the Cappadocians, and many, many of their cousins. And because they are composed of so many different groups, they have very different practices for embrace, because they didn't just completely shed their old cultures. But much of the core of Clan Hecata is made up of groups like the Giovanni, who used to actually take up this particular clan slot in earlier editions, or the Duncerns, or the Putanescas, who are very old mortal families who would go through generation and generation and generation, and some of them would be embraced into the vampire aspect of the family. Because they are, at this point, the only...
Giovanni specifically are basically just mafia, just straight up, so being embraced could kind of be considered like becoming a made man, the mafia.
Clan that is completely outside of any of the major sects or ideologies. They are a little bit insular. Family, though not necessarily blood anymore, and trust count for everything among the Hecata. And part of the reason for this is that they founded themselves as a self-defense thing, a last-ditch desperate effort, because most of them got almost annihilated by the Second Inquisition. The clan has access to the disciplines Auspex, which is highly sharpened senses, Fortitude, which is supernatural toughness, and Oblivion, which they share with Clan La Sombra. Yeah. But instead of being, you know, shadow bending, or anything even remotely thematically related to shadow bending, it's necromancy. Because of some obscure lore technicality that says that both of these things are related in the lore. Like, not mechanically, they're just really...
Yeah, it's like how... So, blood sorcery and thaumaturgy in the lore is technically 2 different things. Where I believe it is, thaumaturgy is all types of blood sorcery, while blood sorcery is specifically the Tremere version. Which is confusing as heck, but yes. And then, like, the shadow, like, obtenebration and necromancy are types of thaumaturgy. Yeah, I know, it's dumb. Overall, I quite like Vampire the Masquerade, but it's like one of those. You know, because it's kind of an old game, you get these weird rules like that, and for some reason they never decided, okay, let's just rework this a little bit more.
Completely different concepts. But because of some obscure thing in the lore, they have to be put into one discipline. And so in practice, what you have is an Oblivion that is actually 2 different disciplines with completely different abilities, but because of how the rules work, in theory, unless the GM, which is probably going to do this, forbids it explicitly, you can pick from the abilities of necromancy and shadowbending like willy-nilly, completely annihilating the identity of the trademark ability of 2 really cool clans. And my question is, was it worth it? Was it really that important to convey mechanically to players that these 2 concepts are related within the lore of the game?
Clearly it was worth it. I mean, obviously, like, come on. It's very important that people know this. Like, obviously.
Or maybe was it too expensive to get another one of these beautiful icons here made? I really don't get it, and it makes me mad. The clan bane is the painful kiss, which the kiss is a slang term for when a vampire bites and drains someone, which usually is a very pleasant experience for the victim. But in the case of the Hecata, it's even more excruciating than it should be. Now, it used to be that all these different bloodlines had their own little flaws, like the Samedi and the Cappadocians. They just straight up used to look like corpses, or the Nagaraja had to consume the flesh of their victims in order to gain any sustenance, which is interesting because this means they always have to kill the victim that they're draining, and also it takes a while to do it. But what they did, and I promise you this is 100% just game design reasons, is they said, well, here, because of through magic, they now all have the Giovanni clan bane, and the old ones are no longer a thing. Which, let me tell you, a lot of game masters do not like to run it that way.
Yeah, it's understandable why people don't run it that way. I can understand why they did it that way. It's a simplification thing. It's to make sure, like, when you have a new player, they don't get, like, overwhelmed. I think it's a bad idea in this case. I think it's okay to have a bunch of options in general with these kind of games. Maybe put them in an optional thing at the end of the book or something. You know, like, hey, by the way, we have also these, like, other options at the end of the book that you can check out if you've, like, played a game or two. You know? Like, I don't know. I feel like there's better ways to do it than just, this now doesn't exist anymore.
Compulsion that they commonly suffer from is kinda weird, but I think very cool. It's called morbidity, and it's this very strong drive to investigate death. This could be diagnosing a medical problem with someone that they sense is dying, or it could be solving a murder mystery. The Hecata Antediluvian is the thing that unites them, by the way, because though they are all various different bloodlines with different founders, they are all ultimately descended of Cappadocius. Another of the more kindred affairs involved antediluvians. Cappadocius was actually diablerized by Augustus Giovanni some time ago, which is why he used to count as the antediluvian of Clan Giovanni. Some notable Hecata include Isabel Giovanni, who has infiltrated every single one of the major sects into like very high positions at one point or another. Poctli, the founder of the Pisanop bloodline, who actually died in order to create the conditions that led to the formation of the Hecata, and the Capuchin, who is the de facto political leader of the Hecata, and who may not even be one of their clan descended of Cappadocius at all. The clandestine.
A lot of these characters are kind of esoteric on purpose, by the way.
And isolated clan Banu Hakim, also known as the Assamites, or the Clan of the Hunt, represents the archetypal Orient-type vampire that is, like, from the Orient.
Again.
That's, like, a thing. I mean, yeah, technically all vampire clans are from the Middle East, because that was where the first city was located. I have a personal fascination with the Banu Hakim. I love them very much, and they are sort of modeled after the historical assassins, down to the idea that they lived in, like, an isolated mountain fortress called Alamut. And though they do kill people...
Having been playing, like, a bunch of Assassin's Creed 4, I'm now imagining, like, a La Sombra pirate fighting it out with a Banu Hakim. Like, La Sombra being part of the Templars, and then, you know, Banu Hakim being part of the Assassins. God dang. Oh, I want a World of Darkness pirate game so bad. God, that would be fun. Like, think like, you know, Black Flag, but it's vampires, that kind of thing.
People for money, their main intended role in vampire society is as a sort of law enforcement. This is also one of the main groups that they like to embrace from, specifically investigators, because they have this drive to hunt down, if you will, the truth, and a propensity for self-sacrifice for a higher cause. They also like to get learned people, scholars on board, if they prove that they have a lot of dedication to what they do over like an extended observation period. They also kinda used to like not embrace women. After Banu Hakim has been embraced, they are subjected to a rigorous...
I forgot about the no women thing, actually. That's funny. It's been a while since I've played with the Banu Hakim, so yeah.
Training program followed by another 7 years of indenture to their master, and if they fail any of the test, or if they show any amount of disobedience, their master straight up just kills them. Probably involving diablerie too, which is one of the reasons why the Banu Hakim have had a fairly strained relationship with the Camarilla at times, because in the Camarilla, that is considered the absolute worst crime a vampire could possibly commit. The clan has access to the disciplines Blood Sorcery, which is like the same thing that the Tremere have, the blood magic, Celerity, which is super speed, and Obfuscate, which allows them to become undetectable. In earlier editions, they kinda had 3 different loadouts for disciplines, because they had a warrior, a vizier, and a sorcerer caste, and their thing wasn't the same discipline as the Tremere. They had their own thing. It did have a greater focus on, like, blood magic in the actual literal sense of controlling blood, which in a vampire society, you can imagine how scary that is.
Also, bloodbending is just really cool, let's be honest. Everybody who has ever watched Avatar: The Last Airbender knows bloodbending is cool. Creepy and terrifying, but cool.
Clanbane has changed a lot over the years for lore reasons. Currently, it is the overwhelming urge when they taste the blood of another vampire to diablerize that vampire because they are attracted fundamentally to the blood of evildoers that need to be punished. And in a sense, being a vampire is such an unbelievable transgression against the natural order that it makes that irresistible to the Banu Hakim. Now, it used to be that each of the three castes had their own little clanbane, but the one they all shared was that their skin would grow darker with age. This is a real thing that used to be the case, and I guess someone at some...
I won't lie, I kind of forgot about that one. Oh boy.
point figured out.
It's probably not a good idea, yeah.
Like the best idea to have. Like it's ever so slightly a little bit problematic. In line with their bane is their compulsion.
I can see what they were trying to do. I'm not gonna defend it, but I can see what they were trying to do. It's just like, something else. You need something else. I personally, one idea I have seen before, and maybe something cool is the idea of like their skin becoming tattooed with things, like slowly over time, just based on their actions effectively. Like their skin tells the story of their life, sort of thing, which, like becoming like a walking piece of art effectively, which makes you conspicuous, but very interesting.
To pass judgment. If someone that they know or in their presence does something that they consider to be unethical, they will feel an urge to drink from them, to enact punishment by taking some of their blood. Which, of course, given that they're usually surrounded by vampires, would lead to the problematic situation of it triggering their clan bane.
Indeed.
Banu Hakim Antediluvian is a guy called Hakim, and the story that the Banu Hakim tell about him is that he basically embraced himself as a mortal by killing two immensely powerful vampires of the second generation as punishment for their corruption. Some claim that his goal is to exterminate all vampires, which is almost definitely not true, but it's a convenient way to say, oh, those damned foreigners. Some notable Banu Hakim include Urshulgi, who rather recently awoke from torpor and looked around, just immediately took control of the clan and said, hang on, who is this Islam guy, and why are you worshipping him instead of Hakim? Repent your idolatry or you will be destroyed immediately. Which has kind of led to a schism that is currently plaguing the clan, where a lot of Banu Hakim sort of went to the Camarilla. Fatima al-Fakari, who for a time was one of their most effective assassins and probably the first woman to ever be embraced into the clan. And Montgomery Coven, who is a very young Sabbat-aligned or formerly Sabbat-aligned Banu Hakim, who through sheer luck in the early 1990s managed to become immensely powerful by diablerizing Mithras, the Ventru Prince of London. The nomadic and deceitful Ravnos, also known as the Haunted or the Clan of Seekers, is supposed to represent the vampiric archetype of, how do I say this? How do I best put this? They're gypsies. They're basically, the idea is that they're gypsies that will sneak into your house at night and drink your blood. Look.
So, Well of Darkness, I'm sure you'll get into it as well, but I want to talk about that a little bit as well. Well of Darkness has a lot of problems because it was written in like the 90s mostly. And all the books are interesting sometimes. Some of them are very good. Some of them, though, are interesting, let's say. Yeah, let's call it interesting. And, well, bluntly, it's kind of some things you want to keep, some things you want to discard, for sure. While I wouldn't want to discard all of the Clan Ravnos, obviously, there's some, like, problematic things in there that we could definitely discuss, like, okay, what are some things that we want to keep? What are some things that we want to get rid of?
Look, you have to consider that the Vampire the Masquerade, the first book, came out in 1991.
Yeah.
Cultural, sensitivities were a bit different back then.
Indeed.
We're talking about, White Wolf, which even in 1994, which was a few years after Vampire came out, published this.
Yep.
World of Darkness Gypsies. That's the book where they had a real-life category of minority groups that they took and made them mechanically distinct magical beings, distinct from humans in the same way that, vampires or werewolves or changelings are in the World of Darkness lore. Which is,
It's wild to think about how World of Darkness can sometimes be incredibly tactful and well-written and well done and, very well considered. And then sometimes they can just dive off a cliff,
wild that they thought this was a cool thing to do even back then. But yes, the core of the Ravnos clan is of and traveling with, usually, the various different ethnic groups descended of the Roma. In the West, at least. They're a whole different clan in India that basically has very little to do with the rest of the world. Especially the new edition has changed a lot of the baggage that comes with this without having to retcon anything into reframing them a little bit as trickster, daredevil type people. And just going away from ethnicity for a moment, those are really the preferred group that the Ravnos embrace from adrenaline junkies and social outcasts that manage to make their own way in life.
Basically, anybody who shows up on a Red Bull video, is probably gonna be embraced by Ravnos.
Trailblazers, unperturbed with the strict rules of polite society, who like to pull pranks every once in a while, have a good sense of humor, and want to use their eternal unlife to actually see something of the world. In other words, absolute legends.
You know
it. Has access to the disciplines animalism, which is control over animals, obfuscate, which allows them to become undetectable, and presence, which is alluring charisma. The latter two form the amalgam power called chemistry, which used to be actually a discipline that they had, along with fortitude. Once again, a change I'm not particularly happy with for blah 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 reasons we've already gone into. But basically, chemistry allows them to create illusions to fool other people. Their clan base.
Which, illusions in general, illusion magic is super fun.
Doomed, which is in no way evocative of what that actually mechanically means, even though it makes sense in the lore, once again. And basically it means they need to sleep in a different location every night. Now I'm not talking the other side of the room, but at least a kilometer away. Their common compulsion is to tempt fate, which really is just the classic adrenaline junkie move of doing something extremely dangerous for no other reason than it would be cool. The Ravnos
stuntman be like.
Antediluvian is called Zapatasura, but he's also known as Drakian, and he very notably woke up from torpor in 1999, sending literally every single Ravnos in the entire world into a homicidal frenzy for a week. This obviously almost entirely destroyed the whole clan. The overwhelming majority of Ravnos just died during this time. And they used incredibly powerful Eastern vampires, which are a different category of vampires called Quajin, which are not even probably related.
I hear Quajin and I can instantly hear Big D starting to yell about them. Lab group based in LA!
To the vampires and Vampire the Masquerade, and wizards used a bunch of orbital satellite nukes to stop this guy from the just path of destruction he was cutting through India. Now you know why antediluvians can be kinda spooky. Some notable Ravnos include Khalil Ravana, who is deeply addicted to the act of diablerie, Alexis Sorokin, an unparalleled master thief who is being hunted by the Camarilla, and Sinavea, a rather ancient Ravnos who prefers to spend her time mentoring younger groups of vampires and sometimes other supernatural beings, usually while pretending to not be a vampire at all. The devout and pestilential official
didn't know
clan
about that
ministry, also known as the Corruptors or the Followers of Set, represents the kind of demonic vampire that is just evil and opposed to all things that are good and proper.
I won't lie, the Ministry is very fun to roleplay. These guys are debauched, and it's very fun.
Christian stuff. It functions as a sort of vampire church that puts out the official vampire religion, obviously, in their view. And it kind of functions in practice as like an anti-real church, which instead of espousing virtues, espouses doing sin. And by that I mean like all of the sin. They don't just like indulging in extreme hedonism, but also actively annihilating the compassionate fabric of society. They
For 40k fans, it's very Slaneshi.
are serious cultists, and those are also like the exact kind of people that they want in their clan for their embrace. They're usually mortals who were already involved with their splintered and fractured devil cults while they were alive. And also, you can become a follower of Set no matter what clan you're from. Even as a vampire, you can essentially convert. That doesn't mean that you like change your abilities and get a new clan bane.
Yeah,
you
no.
are fully accepted into the clan and will be taught their powers. The whole embracing evil and corruption and destructive hedonistic indulgence does actually have a religious purpose, and that they believe that you need to go to the absolute limits of experience in order to be able to free yourself from the flesh prison that your soul is trapped in.
Yeah.
And becoming a vampire for them is just the first step on that journey. And
Which, if you think about it, for the mage players amongst you, that might sound familiar to the Order of the Ecstatics in Mage the Ascension. And there is some overlap there. Obviously, they don't trust each other because the Ecstatics don't tend to want to have, like, society collapse itself, but, you know, like, the edges of experience, that's pretty fitting.
once you have achieved that, you'll be in some sort of like perverse nirvana state that they all want to achieve. This plays heavily into the various doomsday cult
Orgasm yourself to ascension. Sorry.
aspects that they also have. The clan has access to the disciplines Obfuscate, which allows them to become undetectable, Presence, which is alluring charisma, and Protean, which allows them to gain animal traits and transform into animals, here usually snakes. This discipline used to be called Serpentis, and it was much more focused on like magic and magical aspects, but yet again, a whole clan's mechanical identity really needed to be condensed down into a single amalgam power. Honestly, if Vampire 5 didn't have the best hunger and humanity mechanics by like a light year of all the editions, I would despise it. Their clan bane is that they absolutely...
Yeah, 5th edition has some incredible hunger mechanics, it is true.
Light, and not just sunlight, but any bright light. Even like a full moon, you know, it doesn't hurt them specifically, but they find it very irritating. And if they ever are exposed to sunlight, it is especially damaging to them. Their clan compulsion is transgression, which is about manipulating people into breaking their most sacred ethical and moral precepts, spreading corruption everywhere they go. The ministry antediluvian is none other than the Egyptian god Set, which is why most of the clan is situated in and around Europe and the general Maghreb sort of region. And the thing
I actually find it kind of interesting how my first introduction to Set was in Age of Mythology, when you got to play against him, very much so, as he was one of the evil gods trying to unleash the Titans in that game. Oh man. God, Age of Mythology is so good.
about Set is that he worships a, well, it's not even demonic anymore sort of entity that exists in the Great Void, and all it wants to do is destroy and be evil and spread corruption. Some notable ministers include Kementiri, who is a corrupter so vile that the Camarilla created a whole slew of extremely powerful institutions just to hunt her down. Nefertiti, a very powerful, pure, unadulterated narcissist who sees herself as the rightful sole vampire queen of all of Europe, and she has managed to turn several animals, especially snakes, into vampires. And Hesha
Which is pretty
Ruhadze,
badass.
a scholar of the occult so renowned that his sire actually renamed himself into Abu Ruhadze, so like the father of Ruhadze. Also, he has like a really cool monocle. And that's it.
That is a cool monocle.
That's the 13 clans.
He also gives me like Isaac vibes from Castlevania, you know, like the knife and like the sort of learned look.
There is also something
Also bald.
called caitiff, which is vampires that don't know what their clan is. They sometimes have very interesting combinations of disciplines and are not really bound to the disciplines.
Caitiff are very
their
interesting,
clan,
for
which
sure.
is sometimes the exact reason why their sire abandoned them. While that may sound very cool, bear in mind that caitiff are the absolute lowest of the low in vampire society. No one likes them, no one wants anything to do with them. It's not really advisable to play one. So
Oh no, there's a lower point. The Thin Bloods.
there you go. Even if before watching this you knew nothing about Vampire the Masquerade, now you have a functional, basic knowledge
Thank you,
of
Bagacree.
what you maybe should be aware of if you're going to play the game. There is
Really
a
quickly, before we move on, I just want to talk a little bit more about Thin Bloods. So, Caitiff are somewhat related to Thin Bloods in a way. So Caitiff don't have a clan bane, as was mentioned, and have a bit of a grab bag of powers, generally, because something happened to where their blood is kind of their own thing. And that's super interesting, right? And the main reason a lot of people play them is because of that social thing, and because Vampire the Masquerade is a social game. Starting at the bottom rung, and like working in vampire society can be very frustrating after a while. That being said, I think Caitiff, this might sound kind of mad, Caitiff, in my opinion, is one of the most interesting ways to play the game, personally, because it allows you to see the game from the street level in a different way than almost any other clan, because most clan vampires do at least have some connection to other clan members. Like, this varies, you know, the Tremere and the Nosferatu are a lot tighter knit than the Bruja and the Gangrel, but generally, you know, they are pretty tight. Then, if you compare that to Caitiff have no clan, so Caitiff kind of inherently benefit from lying about their origins. They benefit from being secretive from the get-go, which as a character thing is very interesting. And then on top of that, the Thin Bloods. So Thin Bloods are sort of half vampires almost. They are vampires whose blood is so thin that the vitae doesn't fully take, basically. And they have their own type of alchemy, basically, which can be quite powerful, actually. It can be very powerful. And Thin Bloods are not to be underestimated, frankly. While they're far from as powerful as a true vampire, they can do a lot with what they have. And they do have some human advantages that other vampires don't. Anyway, I do think we are going to leave it there. Well, with that, thank you all very much for watching. If you are a member, you can see yourself scrolling in the background. As always, this was a lot of fun, honestly. I quite like hearing Bagacree yap, and I hope I added something to the proceedings with my yapping about Caitiff and Thin Blood and all of that sort of thing. Honestly, maybe I need to make a video on, like, World of Darkness sometime, and like game design related or something like that. Or like storytelling. I don't know. I'll think about that a little bit. Regardless, though, a very special thank you to our very important planets, Ku, SCP Realized, and Cool Mr. Cortez, and of course, Hato, Orlan Dog, Reed, Ellie Cute Puppy, and Alex the DM over on Ko-Fi for your support. Thank you, and have a lovely rest of your day. Bye-bye!